I'm Dean Randall. As president of the South Dakota Retailers Association, I've become very aware of the impact chemical dependency has on the economy. It costs business firms, large and small, billions of dollars each year, and those costs are passed on to you, the consumer. That makes the pursuit of help for the alcoholic and other drug abuser everybody's business. River Park recognizes that everyone is paying more for goods and services because of this problem, and they asked Leonard Firestone of Firestone Tire Company and some community leaders of South Dakota to discuss the situation for your benefit. Here is Glenn Jorgensen and Leonard Firestone to host a special employer-consumer segment of the It's Great to Be Alive series.
Leonard, I'd like to start by really, again, thanking you and your wife, Nikki, for making the trip to South Dakota to share with us in our ongoing efforts to increase the awareness, the understanding, the knowledge of people towards the disease of alcoholism and drug dependency. And so I just say thank you on behalf of many people.
Well, you couldn't keep me out. You know, after our discussions at the Desert and at the Betty Ford Center, and you told me what you were doing here, I just couldn't wait to see it. And
among the giants of industry, Leonard Firestone is one of the most admired. A gentleman, a gentle giant in the business world in spite of his alcoholism. He tells his story to Glenn Jorgensen of River Park in this special segment of the series, It's Great to Be Alive, a public service presentation of this station and River Park. As you watch the Firestone story unfold, be aware of the impact of early detection and diagnosis of chemical dependency on all involved, the victim, the spouse and family, and very especially the business associates of the addicted person. Firestone Tire Company was one of the first corporations in the country to realize the importance of providing help for troubled employees. We'll explain more later. First, let's listen to the conversation.
Would you share with us, Leonard, a bit of how you see it happening, that you came to the point of recognizing and having to deal with your own alcoholism? When do you think it started?
Well, to answer your first part first, of course, alcohol, when it gets down in somebody's system, doesn't know who it is. Maybe the President of the United States, maybe a bum. So that's the first thing we have to remember, that we're all alike in terms of whether we get cancer, whether we get diabetes, whether we are an alcoholic. That we don't control. Something, our genes or something else controls that. So it's not unusual at all to me that anybody might get it and might have that disease. I knew early on when I was a kid that because of my reaction to drinking, that something that I was doing that was a little wrong, because I was drinking more than other people. Mm-hmm. I thought I shouldn't do that. And when I'd get in trouble and in terms of my health and I have to go to the hospital because of drinking, the doctor would tell me, "Len, you just shouldn't drink." I'd say, "Yeah, I know, that's right, I shouldn't, I won't. I got to cut down." And being an alcoholic, it was impossible for me to handle it on that basis, that I was drinking too much. And in the early days, of course, we didn't know much about alcoholism.
That's right.
Somebody asked me, "When did you first learn that you were an alcoholic?" And I can't answer that. Certainly, in the early days, I didn't think anything about alcoholism. I just thought, I got to be careful, I shouldn't drink so much. And then the knowledge of the problem of being a disease, we've learned that, and slowly I began to realize that I did have this disease, and I couldn't control it without help.
It's hard for the individual that's affected or afflicted with it, because we know the denial that is a part of the disease. What were some of the things that were happening in your life? What was it like as you were progressing into your advanced stages of alcoholism, or however advanced it was? Can you share with us, because I'm sure that the people watching, perhaps some of the things that you experienced might send up warning signals to them that something might be wrong in their time. When do you think you really started the overuse or the where it began to give you the problems? Was it in high school?
Well, actually, yes, in high school, in terms of little proms and so on, I was always the guy that maybe had to be helped home or was a little tighter than the other people. In college, that was the same thing. And fortunately, or unfortunately, I was a periodic. And I was very anxious when I went into Father's business, which he built. I had 4 brothers. We all very proud of what our father had accomplished, and we're always anxious to make good in that business. And because I was a periodic, you know, I go months and not.
I was going to say, maybe you better explain what a periodic is.
Yeah, periodic is I wouldn't drink all the time. You know, I'd decide on the 4th of July maybe, I'm going to have some fun tonight, and then it got away from me.
When you did drink on those periods, at those times, generally then you lost control, is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Not always, but usually. And then that'd go for 2 or 3 days, and I'd end up in the hospital, and then people would cover for me. My wife would make an excuse that I was not feeling well and couldn't get to the office, or the doctor would put me in the hospital with a gastric upset or food poisoning or
diverticulitis.
Yeah, whatever it was not the real reason. And that was enabling me to go on the next time and covering up. So I never had to come to grips with it. And as I say, the fact that I was in good health usually, I had a strong constitution, and so the periodic thing I got by with.
And the rationalizing and always saying the next time it'll be different, next time I'll handle it.
You know, because I see somebody else that can do it and say, well, you know, why can't I? You don't realize that you're an alcoholic. What are there, 15% of us that drink are alcoholics, something like that. And if you're one of them, you might as well face it. And you have to face it if you have some other disease. I'm not ashamed of it. I used to think there was a stigma. I think there are many people, Betty Ford, for instance, has taken a lot of stigma out of it, and doctors have agreed that it's a disease. So I'm not ashamed of it at all. I'm unhappy that I got that disease, but I can do something about it. So I don't shout about it any more than you would if you had diabetes. You don't go around telling everybody, I'm a diabetic. You don't go around telling everybody you're an alcoholic. But if the occasion arises, yes, I am an alcoholic.
The most unfortunate fact is that people have the concept that so long as he or she is functioning, that they couldn't have a problem. But the fact is you could be running a huge company and very much be having a problem. Is that not right?
Exactly right. And thinking, well, next time, we go right back to that. Next time I won't be doing it that way. And, you know, I've got such a happy life. Why do I want to mess it up? So I'll be careful.
Yeah, right.
And you're not careful for whatever reason. The genes of an alcoholic are they're better than you know better than I do about it. But I have no excuse, and I think an alcoholic doesn't need an excuse. They just do it.
Glenn and this gentle giant of industry went on to discuss his first attempt at treatment, and intervention by his children, his failure, and then another try.
How did you get, people would be interested, I think, Leonard, in knowing what happened for you to then get into treatment that time?
A second time?
Yeah, would you share some of that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to tell you about that. I was, we were in the desert, and I live...
When you say the desert, you mean Palm Desert?
Palm Desert, Rancho Mirage, actually. And President Ford and I live next door to each other. Betty had just gone through her rehabilitation for her Valium and her booze situation, and she was having a 1-year birthday at her house.
For her sobriety?
For her sobriety, 1-year sobriety, yeah. And Nikki and I were going for this little celebration, and but I'd been drinking for 3 or 4 days, and that afternoon, Nikki called Betty and said, we can't come, Len's drunk. She said, I know it. I mean, you know, an alcoholic thinks nobody knows what they're doing. Everybody knows. And as a result of that, Nikki got a nurse who had been helpful to Betty, and they came over and sort of brought me down. And the second day I was sitting there on the couch, and this nurse was rubbing my feet, which I thought was, oh, that was nice of her. I loved that. But what she was doing was holding me on the couch so I couldn't go get a drink, and I was going to get an intervention. In walked Betty, President Ford, my wife, my son, Dr. Persh, one or two others. And that was a different kind of intervention than my kids. I mean, I think they call those kind of interventions tough love.
They were prepared.
They were prepared, and they said the things to me that I couldn't believe. Some of it I knew, some of it I guessed at, but they're pretty tough things that they charged me with, and they were all true. And the net result of all of this is, okay, what do you want me to do?
What do I do now?
What do you do? You go and care manner, or you go for rehabilitation. Greatest decision I ever made. And off I went. That was be 6 years ago in April, and I mean, I've had it. There's just no question in my mind.
So that, again, the willingness of those people around you who cared about you, being willing to take the risk of incurring your displeasure, but knowing that you weren't able to function that well for yourself at that point, their willingness to help you really then became the difference in your life, didn't it?
Yes, indeed. And it was the fact that they would go to the extent that they did to show me what was really happening to me, my relation to them, my relation with my family, my son, so on. It was serious. I said, I got to do something about this. I think I'd rather have fixed that relationship than to worry about dying.
Yes. Well, I'm stressing that because it's so important that people watching this understand that there is something that can be done, but that they may have to prepare themselves to help the one that's afflicted to do something. So you're a good proof of that. And the other thing, Leonard, that comes out of that then, the result of their actions, the result of your then agreeing to get some help, I'd like to just have you share a bit some of the feelings you now have, some of your involvement, and you know, you've been involved with Betty Ford Center. What's life like now then, since you have begun your recovery?
Well, in answer to that question, I think the first thing I'd like to say is that, and I think it's true of all alcoholics that are recovered or recovering, get the monkey off your back. I want somebody else, a close friend, a dear friend, a relative, whoever it might be, to get the monkey off their back, and I want to help them do it, because life has so much more meaning. It's as I mentioned, your confidence in yourself, your serenity, your happiness, and knowing that you're going to be where you're supposed to be, and you're going to be with friends. And it doesn't bother me that they drink. I mean, that I'm happy that they can do it nicely and do, and I'm happy they accept me for not drinking. I mean, it made no difference at all. And
well, you've made quite a contribution then, you know, of the gift you've been given. You know, you were one of the moving forces behind Betty Ford. Do you want to share just a bit of how that came into being, Leonard? Well, mainly because we stole one of your key men. I want you to share.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy about that because of what I'm going to say. But when our friends and saw what had happened to Betty and I, and how different we were, what life meant to us, and the whole ambiance of living, suggested that we put together a task force to put up a rehabilitation center on the grounds of the Eisenhower Medical Center. And Betty and I were looking for some way where we could help people because of the feeling that we have and all alcoholics feel to help somebody else. And so we agreed to do that. We were co-chairmen, she and I, of a task force to raise the money, build a building, put together an organization for a rehabilitation center. To do that, we had to go to really some professional help too. Joe Cruz had that idea in the desert, although he hadn't been able to put it together financially and so on. So we asked Joe to join us. Joe put together the program, developed the material of the buildings, the plans and the program, and got together the staff, which was the most important thing, all of which we worked with him and helped. But so Joe's sort of the daddy of the Betty Ford Center in the terms of the professional end. And that's how it started, and that's how it's ending up in a very wonderful thing, because we have 60 beds, you'll have 100, and I'm just so pleased to have been here to see what you're doing, because we're helping 60, we hope, and you'll be helping 100. We hope to spread what we're doing out into other areas, not Betty Ford Centers, but our know-how, if it's good, we want to give to others who want to do the same thing, and just as you are doing. And I think that they should be very proud in this state of the fact that you have these 3 wonderful places, and I'm very much impressed with it. And not only you're helping the alcoholic, but all those people that are affected by the alcoholic. So it's a tremendously spread thing. And
one of the areas there, Leonard, that we reach, and I'd just like a couple of comments from you on the value. One of the things we do is work with employers. What is your company's policy on working with alcoholic employees?
I think we were one of the first companies that began to realize that alcohol was a disease and not a character deficiency. We had people, professional people, come in and set up in the company a counseling service. And we also, for instance, we'd have a meeting of the foreman and point out to them in a professional way, in a little more detail than I'm going to say, but that when you have a tire builder on the line, you know he's drinking, you know he shows up late, you know the quality of there's something wrong there. Now, don't cover for that guy, even though he's a good friend of yours and you want to see him get in trouble. Come to the counselor, tell him you think so-and-so, Joe's got a problem. And the company is not going to fire him for that. The company wants to help him. We want to help him get into treatment. We want to help counsel him. We want to save that guy. Now, that's not all altruistic, because to replace that guy costs us a lot more money than get him straightened out, but both things are good for the company and for the employee.
Very good, Leonard. I'm just so happy that we had this time together, and while you were here in South Dakota, what do you think is going to happen? Are we going to get you back here sometime?
Oh, sure, we sure will. I want to see what you're going to be doing and continue coming. And well, this is my first trip. It's been 2 full days, and I've loved it.
Well, we look forward to that, and we know that you'll continue to carry the message. And the title of this program is that it's great to be alive, and I think you radiate that, Leonard. And I'm glad that I know you.
Thank you for having a chance to chat with you.
Okay.
And thank you, gentlemen, for letting us in on that interesting conversation. Well, it seems that Leonard Firestone, a giant in the business world, believes firmly in an employee assistance program for Firestone Tire Company. And it works just as well for banks, municipalities, and smaller companies, like the hardware store on the corner or a home-owned grocery chain. The Employer Service Division of River Park offers a cost-efficient confidential program to every firm, large and small. A new concept that will make for more productive workers, happier families, and more successful organizations. Here discussing what an employee's assistance program has meant to Western Bank is Glenn with T.J. Reardon, President.
Tom, why did you start an EAP program?
We started it, Glenn, in the hopes that if a staff member had gotten to the point of at the critical stage of a problem, whatever it might be, that we would have a source to go to help them. But more important, in taking a longer range view, we thought that if the staff knew that they had a place to go to in the early stages of the development of a problem, they could curtail it, take care of it, and not have to go to the depths of whatever the problem might be, but rather nip it in the bud for themselves, and certainly it helps the company if they resolve the problem at its early stages.
Some of the benefits of the program, what do you see surfacing really? For example, we know that one thing that is impacted by addressing problems of employees is their attendance record. What are some other areas that you see that really benefit the company?
Glenn, Certainly, one of the most important is absenteeism. You've already touched on that. I think healthcare costs are impacted. I think productivity is impacted. I think morale within the organization is impacted. If someone's having a problem, they can impact their associates within the organization and have a negative impact on them. And certainly if a staff member is having a problem and it becomes public knowledge, it has an impact on their family and certainly can have an ultimate impact on the organization for which they work.
That's because again, and in your organization, you're known as your people are known as a part of the company, so their actions reflect on the company.
I think that's true.
I know that some of your people who have benefited from the program then become effective tools in carrying the message to other people. The Western Bank, my employer, has this program. They care enough to provide it. It's for our benefit, and I've utilized it, and I hope that you will too, because that's one of the barriers that I know you had in the beginning, was employees feeling that, you know, what's this all about, and to find out there's something that is really a benefit to them.
Glenn, if I might say that I think one of the most important hurdles that we had to overcome in the early stages was that it is completely confidential.
Good point.
That nobody at Western Bank knows if our staff uses the services. We are provided with numbers of people who have used the services, but never any names. And your point is, I think that after a person has used your services, our EAP services, then if the circumstances are right, they can share with other staff members the success or what happened and know that it is completely confidential, and nobody's job rests on the fact that they cannot lose their job if they went and sought help from River Park.
Right. So, in summation, TJ, it'd be fair then, I won't put words in your mouth, but that the program for you at least has proven to be humanely a good investment, and from a business standpoint has been most worthwhile.
Absolutely. I'd do it again in a minute. I intend to continue always to have an EAP program for our staff, because I think it is my responsibility as the president of this organization to provide that service to our people.
Private business and industry aren't the only organizations that can benefit from an employee assistance program. Governments, like the city of Brookings, South Dakota, with 160 employees, has found that things are running more smoothly since they have an employee assistance program. We spoke with Roger Prunty, formerly mayor of Brookings for 5 years, now in private business. He spoke of his experiences with an EAP as mayor.
In looking at the problems that we had in Brookings, and I think probably most of those problems dealt with drugs and alcohol, but certainly those problems grow into other problems. We looked for an alternative choice to terminating employees. I recall one employee that had an alcohol problem, and we were ready to terminate him if he didn't do something about that problem. And in fact, his remark when they went to talk to him was, "I'm going to hang it up." Well, we don't want people with 20 years of experience hanging it up and quitting. We want to do something about it. So the Employee Assistance Program, I think, allowed us to provide for employees without pushing it on them, professional help for those problems. And I think, well, I've been real happy with that program. I think it's done an outstanding job. It's not a pushy program, but it doesn't directly always provide the help, but it does put the employee in contact with people who know where to go to get that help. So I think we've done a good job with the Employee Assistance Program. I'm pleased with what River Park has done in that area, and I'm pleased that the city of Brookings, in fact, chose to go along with that program.
Roger went on to talk about the importance of confidentiality and trust in a program for employees.
I think it's important that employees who are going to a counselor for help feel comfortable with the person that they're talking to. to know that that person will not in any way violate the confidence that the employee is placing in them. I think from that standpoint, people feel comfortable with River Park in that area. I have yet to hear from anyone about our employee assistance program of any employee. I have yet to hear from anybody about the confidence that anyone puts in River Park being violated. I think that's important. And I think if the program is to succeed, that confidence must be there. And with River Park it is.
Then he spoke of River Park's network of outreach offices.
I think River Park's outreach program and their locations around the state of South Dakota, and in Brookings, South Dakota, where we have an outreach office, and where people in Brookings are aware that it's there and feel comfortable about it, happy to have it in Brookings, South Dakota, by the way, that I think we have a more immediate response to the needs of people simply because they know the office is here. They know where they can go, and they feel comfortable going there. I think it's important that you're locally located, and no one in South Dakota is very far from a River Park office.
American Western is another company using the Employers Service Division of River Park. We asked President John Mulligan what he thought about it.
Our employees and their families are the most important part of American Western Corporation. That's why we called on River Park for involvement in the Employee Assistance Program. We've been very pleasantly surprised at how many of our employees have so quickly sought the help of River Park. We feel that our involvement with the River Park Employee Assistance Program shows our employees that we truly care about them and their families.
Leonard Firestone, Roger Prunty, T.J. Reardon, John Mulligan. Diversified businesses, but with a common denominator. They care about their people, their employees. They prove that by having an Employees Assistance Program. It's a cost-effective, sensible business procedure. Business leaders who have asked River Park's Employers Services Division for help found that 25% of their workforce was suffering from personal problems of some kind, and their performance was lowered as a result. Marital differences, problem children, legal and medical needs, low self-esteem, poor living conditions, these are just a few of the stresses that cause poor performance on the job, stresses that River Park can evaluate and find professional help for. If you are an employer, ask River Park about their Employers Service Division. If you are an employee with a problem, tell your supervisor that you need help and see if your firm has an employee assistance program. Demote, transfer, or fire is not the proper answer to the troubled employee. The gentle giant, Leonard Firestone, had the best solution many years ago. Understanding, help, and hope that they can again feel that it's great to be alive.